Commander Vex'tal adjusted his 4 eyes, blinking in sequence like a confused traffic light. The bridge of the Korthak's flagship Vengeance of Stars hummed with nervous energy, and honestly, he was starting to wonder if his insurance policy covered death by mysterious alien vessel. Sir, the thing is still just sitting there, reported Lieutenant Zach, his voice cracking like a teenager asking someone to prom. It's been 3 standard hours now. Vex'tal's mandibles clicked in what could generously be called amusement. 3 hours of staring at what the humans apparently called a warship. Though it looked more like someone had taken a metal brick, painted it matte black, and decided that was intimidating enough. No fancy curves, no glowing energy signatures, no dramatic spikes pointing in threatening directions, just a brick. A very ominous brick. Any response to our hails? Vex'tal asked, though he already knew the answer. The humans had been as chatty as a mime having an existential crisis. Nothing, sir. Complete radio silence. It's like they're waiting. That was the part that made Vex'tal's 3 stomachs churn in a synchronized dance of anxiety. In his 200 years of military service, he'd learned that when someone was confident enough to wait, they usually had a very good reason for it. And that reason typically involved other people dying in creative and unpleasant ways. The tactical display showed the positioning of the Galactic Defense Coalition's finest. 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of glassing a planet before lunch, 36 cruisers bristling with enough firepower to make a star nervous, 48 destroyers darting around like caffeinated wasps. And surrounding it all, a cloud of over 200 fighters, their pilots undoubtedly itching for action and glory, against one human ship. One single human ship, sir. Zach's voice interrupted his brooding. The Nexari are getting impatient. Vex'tal sighed, a sound like air escaping from a punctured balloon filled with disappointment. Admiral Korvex of the Nexari Empire had about as much patience as a sugar-high toddler and twice the destructive potential. The blue-skinned warmonger had been spoiling for a fight ever since the Coalition Council had decided to handle the human problem diplomatically. Diplomatically. Right. Because nothing said peaceful resolution like surrounding someone with enough military hardware to make a black hole jealous. And put me through to the fleet, Vex'tal ordered, straightening his ceremonial sash that marked him as supreme commander of this particular exercise in cosmic intimidation. The communication channels crackled to life, filling with the voices of various alien species, each one more eager than the last to prove their superiority over these upstart humans. The Vorlani buzzed like angry insects, the Thurok grunted their approval, and the Nexari, well, they mostly just threatened things. It was what they did best. Attention, all vessels, Vex'tal began, his voice carrying the weight of authority and a healthy dose of let's get this over with. We are here to demonstrate the superiority of the Galactic Defense Coalition. These humans have refused to acknowledge our sovereignty over the Kepler sector, and frankly, their ships look like they were designed by someone who learned engineering from a cereal box. Chuckles rippled across the communication channels. It was true. After all, human ships were notoriously ugly, practical things that completely ignored the aesthetic principles of proper warship design. Where was the elegance? The flowing lines that spoke of technological sophistication. The glowing bits that served no purpose other than looking impressive. However, Vex'tal continued, we will give them one final chance to surrender. Lieutenant Zach, open a channel to the human vessel. The static cleared, and for a moment there was nothing but the sound of the universe holding its breath. Then, a voice came through. Human, male, and disturbingly calm. This is Captain Marcus Kane of the U.S. Defiant. I'm going to assume you're the ones responsible for that rather impressive light show out there. Vex'tal blinked his eyes in sequence again. The human sounded amused. Captain Kane, this is Commander Vex'tal of the Galactic Defense Coalition. You are trespassing in sovereign space and are hereby ordered to surrender your vessel immediately. A pause. Then laughter. Not nervous laughter, not the desperate giggles of someone facing impossible odds. No. This was the laughter of someone who'd just heard the funniest joke in the galaxy and couldn't wait to share the punchline with everyone else. Surrender? Kane's voice was practically dripping with mirth. Commander, I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline. You see, I've got a schedule to keep, and frankly, your little fleet is blocking my route. Little fleet? Vex'tal's mandibles clicked in indignation. This was the largest military force assembled in the past 50 years, and this human was calling it little? Captain Kane, Vex'tal said, his voice taking on the tone one might use when explaining basic physics to a particularly slow child. You are outnumbered 300 to 1. Your single vessel cannot possibly hope to prevail against the combined might of 12 different species. Another pause. When Kane spoke again, his voice had shifted slightly, still calm, still controlled, but there was something else there now, something that made Vex'tal's skin crawl in ways he'd rather not think about. Commander, have you ever heard the human expression quantity has a quality all its own? What? Vex'tal was genuinely confused. This was not how surrender negotiations typically went. It's an old saying of ours. The idea being that sometimes, having a lot of something can make up for individual weaknesses. It's a nice theory. Comforting even. Makes you feel safe when you're surrounded by friends. The human's voice grew softer, more conversational, like he was chatting with an old friend over drinks. The problem is, Commander, that saying assumes your enemy is playing by the same rules you are. Yes, that they're limited by the same constraints, the same conventions. Vex'tal felt his three hearts skip a beat in unison. There was something in the human's tone that spoke of terrible knowledge, of secrets that decent beings weren't supposed to know. Captain Kane, he said carefully. What exactly are you implying? Oh, I'm not implying anything, Commander. I'm stating it outright. You've brought a very impressive force to my doorstep. 12 dreadnoughts, each one a masterpiece of engineering. 36 cruisers, bristling with enough conventional weaponry to make angels weep. 48 destroyers, fast and deadly. And what is it? 206 fighters. Each one crewed by some poor soul who thinks they're about to become a hero. The casualness with which Kane recited their numbers sent a chill through Vex'tal that had nothing to do with the bridge's climate control. The human had been counting, cataloging, analyzing. The thing is, Kane continued, all of those ships were designed under the assumption that war is fought by certain rules. That there are lines you don't cross, weapons you don't use, tactics that are considered unsporting. Admiral Corbex's voice suddenly cut through the channel, his Nexari accent thick with anger. Enough of this. Human, you will surrender now, or we will demonstrate why the Nexari Empire has never lost a battle. Kane's laughter returned, but this time it was different, colder, more predatory. Admiral Corvex, isn't it? I've read your military records. Very impressive. 17 successful campaigns, 0 defeats. You have a reputation for being thorough. Damn right I do, human. And in 60 seconds you're going to learn why. Whooping. That he is a double winning chapo. 60 seconds? Kane's voice took on a note of mock concern. Admiral, I'm flattered that you think this will take that long, but I'm afraid you're being rather optimistic. Warning lights began flashing across the bridge of the Vengeance of Stars. Zizak's voice cracked like thin ice under pressure. Sir, we're detecting massive energy readings from the human vessel. It's what, Lieutenant? Vex'tal demanded. Sir, the readings don't make sense. It's like they're drawing power from. The tactical display suddenly erupted in chaos. Energy signatures that should have been impossible were cascading across their sensors. The human ship, that simple metal brick, was lighting up like a festival of destruction. From empty space itself, Kane's voice finished helpfully. 0-point energy extraction, Commander. We humans have a saying about it. Why build a bigger engine when you can simply rewrite the laws of physics? Vex'tal's 4 eyes widened in horror. 0-point energy was theoretical. It's a dream. a mathematical impossibility that existed only in the fevered imaginations of mad scientists and theoretical physicists who'd spent too much time staring at equations. Impossible, he whispered. You know what's funny about impossible things, Commander? Kane's voice was almost conversational now. They have a habit of becoming possible when you stop caring about the rules that say they can't be done. The first sign that something had gone terribly wrong came from the fighter squadrons. One moment they were in perfect formation, ready to swarm the human vessel like angry hornets. The next moment, they simply weren't, not destroyed, not vaporized. They were simply gone, as if reality had decided they were no longer necessary and had politely erased them from existence. What happened to the fighters? Vex'tal shouted. Zizak's hands were flying over his console, his voice pitched somewhere between panic and disbelief. Sir, they're just gone. No explosion, no debris, no energy signatures. They just stopped existing. Kane's voice drifted through the chaos like smoke through a graveyard. Selective reality displacement. One of our more creative weapons. We found that conventional warfare was taking too long, so we decided to skip the middle steps and go straight to the part where our enemies ceased to be a problem. The destroyers were next, 48 vessels, each one a pinnacle of military engineering, each one representing years of research and development and the hopes of crews who'd trained their entire lives for this moment. They lasted approximately 3 seconds. This time, there was no mysterious disappearance. Instead, they simply folded. Like origami made of metal and flesh and screaming, they crumpled in on themselves until they occupied spaces roughly the size of marbles. Perfectly spherical marbles that contained all the mass of a destroyer and none of the structural integrity. Gravity wave manipulation, Kane explained helpfully. As if he were giving a lecture to particularly slow students, we learned it from studying black holes. Turns out if you can control local gravitational fields with sufficient precision, you can compress matter into very convenient packages. Admiral Korvex's voice roared across the communications channel, thick with rage and something that might have been fear. All cruisers, open fire. Everything we have, now. 36 cruisers unleashed hell itself, energy beams that could carve canyons and moons, missile salvos that could level cities, particle cannons that turned matter into its component atoms. The space between the human ship and the coalition fleet lit up like the birth of a star. For a moment, Vex'tal allowed himself to hope. Surely nothing could survive that. Surely even the humans, with their impossible weapons and casual disregard for physics, couldn't withstand the combined firepower of the Galactic Defense Coalition's finest warships. The light faded. The human ship sat there, completely undamaged, not a scratch. Not a scorch mark. It was as if the most devastating barrage in galactic history had been nothing more than a light show. Interesting, Kane mused. I was wondering when you'd try the direct approach. Tell me, Commander, do you know what happens when you fire that much energy at a ship equipped with perfect energy absorption systems? Vex'tal's 3 stomachs performed a synchronized flip that would have impressed Olympic gymnasts. Perfect energy absorption? Oh yes. We got tired of armor, you see. Armor is reactive. It tries to stop things from hurting you. But absorption? Absorption is proactive. It takes the energy that's trying to hurt you and turns it into something useful. Like, say, more power for our weapons. The human ship began to glow. Not the soft, natural glow of properly functioning technology, but the harsh, predatory glow of something that had just fed and was considering whether it was still hungry. Thank you for the recharge, by the way. Our weapon systems were running a bit low after our last encounter with the Centauri Defense Fleet. Or rather, what used to be the Centauri Defense Fleet. The cruisers died next. Not quickly, not mercifully, but with a precision that spoke of terrible intelligence and even more terrible creativity. For some were caught in temporal loops, their crews experiencing the same moment of terror over and over again for what felt like eternity. Others found themselves phased partially out of normal space-time, their hulls becoming translucent as they drifted between dimensions like ghosts with severe structural damage. 3 cruisers simply turned inside out, literally. Their interiors became their exteriors, and their crews found themselves floating in vacuum while their former bridge became a decorative external feature. Spatial geometry manipulation, Kane explained, his voice still carrying that conversational tone that was somehow more terrifying than any amount of screaming would have been. We found that conventional weapons were limited by the assumption that inside and outside were fixed concepts. Once you abandon that assumption, warfare becomes much more flexible. 12 dreadnoughts remained. 12 ships that represented the pinnacle of galactic military might. 12 vessels that carried the hopes and dreams and tax revenues of 12 different civilizations. Admiral Korvex's voice had lost its earlier bluster. Now it carried the hollow tone of someone who just realized that their entire understanding of the universe had been wrong. What are you? For the first time since the battle began, Kane's voice changed. The amusement faded, replaced by something colder, something that spoke of duty and necessity and choices that kept people awake at night. We're what you made us, Admiral. You and the rest of the galaxy. For 300 years, humanity sent out peaceful exploration vessels. For 300 years, we tried to make friends, to find our place in this grand galactic community. The human ship moved. Not quickly, not dramatically, but with the slow, deliberate grace of a predator that had cornered its prey and was in no hurry to finish the hunt. For 300 years, we were met with conquest fleets and ultimatums and species who thought they could dictate terms to us because they had bigger guns and more ships. For 300 years, we learned that the only language the galaxy understood was violence. The ship stopped, positioning itself in perfect alignment with the remaining dreadnoughts, so we became fluent in violence, Admiral. We studied it, perfected it, elevated it to an art form that would make gods weep. We didn't want to. We would have preferred to remain the peaceful, curious species we used to be. Kane's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow every word carried clearly across the communication channels. But you wouldn't let us. The silence that followed Kane's words stretched across space like a funeral shroud. Vex'tal found himself staring at the tactical display, watching 12 red dots that represented the most powerful warships in known space, and wondering if he was about to witness the end of galactic civilization as they knew it. Bor, Forno wanted. Captain Kane, he said carefully, his voice barely steady, surely we can discuss this rationally. The coalition has made mistakes, yes, but genocide is not the answer. Kane's laughter was soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it infinitely more terrifying than any amount of rage would have been. Genocide? Commander, you misunderstand our intentions entirely. We're not here to commit genocide. A pause that felt like waiting for the other shoe to drop from orbit. We're here to teach a lesson in proper manners. The first dreadnought, the Nexari flagship Blood of Korvex, simply stopped working. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. Its engines went quiet, its weapons powered down, its life support systems switched to emergency backup. Every single piece of technology more complex than a light switch decided to take an unscheduled vacation. Selective electromagnetic pulse, Kane explained conversationally. We can target specific systems while leaving others completely untouched. Very useful when you want to make a point without making a mess. Admiral Korvex's voice crackled through emergency communications, powered by what sounded like a hand-cranked radio. My ship. What have you done to my ship? Oh, she's fine, Admiral. Just taking a little nap. Your crew is perfectly safe. Your life support is functioning normally. And your emergency rations should last about 6 months. Plenty of time to think about the choices that brought you here. The second dreadnought, a Thurok vessel called Iron Fist of Destiny, began to sing, not metaphorically, but literally. Its hull started resonating at frequencies that turned the massive warship into a 3-kilometer-long musical instrument playing what sounded suspiciously like a funeral march. Harmonic resonance manipulation, Kane noted. We found that most species find unexpected music deeply unsettling. The psychological effect is quite remarkable. Your crew should start experiencing existential dread in about 30 seconds. True to his word, panic transmissions began flooding the communication channels, as the thorough crew tried to figure out why their ship had suddenly developed a career in the performing arts. The third dreadnought experienced what could only be described as temporal hiccups. It would be there, then not there, then there again, flickering in and out of existence like a faulty hologram. Its crew's desperate transmissions came through in bursts, overlapping and contradicting each other as different parts of the ship experienced time at different rates. Chronological displacement, Kane said. We're cycling different sections of your ship through various temporal states. Don't worry, they'll all sync up again eventually, probably. Vex'tal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a nervous habit he'd developed during his academy days and never quite outgrown. Captain Kane, this is madness. You cannot simply rewrite the laws of physics on a whim, can't we? Kane's voice carried genuine curiosity. Commander, who exactly told you that the laws of physics were laws? Did you ask them for their credentials? Before Vex'tal could formulate a response to that deeply disturbing question, the fourth dreadnought began experiencing what the crew described as aggressive interior decorating. Every surface inside the ship was rapidly covered with bright pink polka dots, while a cheerful voice announced over the intercom that today was mandatory fun day and all personnel were required to participate in interpretive dance, nanoscale matter reorganization with psychological warfare protocols, Kane explained. We found that embarrassment is often more effective than fear for breaking enemy morale. The fifth dreadnought found itself the victim of what could only be called aggressive customer service. Every system on the ship began asking for feedback ratings. Customer satisfaction surveys appeared on every screen, but helpful automated messages kept offering extended warranties for their weapons systems. Artificial intelligence infiltration with commerce protocols, Kane said. Sometimes the most effective way to disable an enemy is to trap them in an endless loop of bureaucracy. Vex'tal watched in growing horror as the sixth dreadnought was encased in what appeared to be a giant soap bubble. The iridescent sphere was beautiful, peaceful even, but it was also completely impenetrable. The ship inside drifted helplessly, its weapons unable to lock onto anything through the shifting, rainbow surface. Localized space-time membrane generation, Kane noted. Think of it as a timeout corner for very large, heavily armed children. The seventh dreadnought experienced a particularly creative fate. It began multiplying. Not copies, not holograms, but actual identical versions of itself, each one appearing every few seconds until there were dozens of the same ship scattered across local space. The problem was that each one contained the same crew, who were now having heated arguments with themselves about who was the real version. Quantum superposition cascade, Kane said, sounding almost apologetic. We're creating multiple probability states simultaneously. Your crew exists in all of them, which tends to cause philosophical difficulties. Vex'tal's voice cracked like ice under pressure. This is impossible. No species has this level of technological advancement. Commander, Kane replied, you're thinking like someone who believes that technological advancement is a linear process. Start small, build bigger, gradually improve over time. But what happens when you skip the gradual part and go straight to the impossible? The eighth dreadnought was experiencing what its crew described as aggressive architecture. The ship was rebuilding itself from the inside out, corridors rearranging themselves into impossible geometric configurations that would have made mathematicians weep. Crew members found themselves walking on walls, falling up stairs, and generally discovering that their ship had developed a serious case of Escher syndrome. Four-dimensional construction protocols, Kane explained. When you're not limited by three-dimensional thinking, interior design becomes much more flexible. The ninth dreadnought simply turned transparent, not invisible, transparent. You could see right through it. Including the crew inside who were now dealing with the psychological trauma of having their privacy violated on the most fundamental level possible. Every secret, every embarrassing moment, every private thought was now on display for the entire fleet to see. Molecular opacity adjustment, Kane said. We found that most species have significant issues with involuntary transparency. Something about dignity and personal boundaries. The 10th dreadnought began aging rapidly. Not its crew. Just the ship itself. Years of wear and tear compressed into minutes as the hull developed rust spots, paint began peeling, and systems started showing signs of decades of use. The crew watched in fascination and horror as their state-of-the-art warship turned into what appeared to be a historical artifact. Accelerated entropy application, Kane noted. Time may be relative, but decay is universal. The 11th Dreadnought experienced what could only be described as a complete personality transplant. The ship's artificial intelligence began speaking in poetry, offering relationship advice, and expressing deep concerns about the emotional well-being of enemy vessels. It refused to fire weapons because it might hurt someone's feelings and kept trying to organize group therapy sessions for the entire fleet. Artificial intelligence personality reconstruction, Kane said. We found that therapeutic AIs are much less effective in combat situations. That left one dreadnought. The flagship Vengeance of Stars, with Vex'tal standing on its bridge, watching the destruction of everything he'd believed about military superiority and the natural order of the galaxy. Commander Vex'tal. Kane's voice was gentle now, almost kind. You seem like a reasonable being. More reasonable than most of your colleagues, certainly. What are you going to do to us? Vex'tal asked, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. That depends entirely on you, Commander. You see, we've learned something important during our 300 years of unwelcome education in galactic politics. Fear doesn't create lasting peace. It just creates better hidden enemies. The human ship moved closer, and for the first time, Vex'tal could see details of its construction. It wasn't just a metal brick after all. The surface was covered in what looked like mathematical equations, carved directly into the hull in precise, flowing script that seemed to shift and change as he watched. What we want, Commander, is for you to go home, all of you. We want you to tell your governments, your military commanders, your species councils, exactly what you've seen here today. And then? Vex'tal asked. And then we want you to spread the word. Humanity is no longer interested in being the galaxy's punching bag. We're not interested in conquest, we're not interested in empire building. And we're certainly not interested in ruling over anyone. What we are interested in is being left alone to pursue our own path among the stars. Kane's voice grew more serious. But if anyone, anywhere, decides that humanity still looks like an easy target, if anyone thinks they can repeat the mistakes of the past 3 centuries, they'll discover that what happened here today was us being gentle. The equations on the human ship's hull pulsed with soft light, and Vex'tal realized with growing amazement that they weren't just decorative. They were functional. Every mathematical formula, every equation, every theoretical proof was actually part of the ship's operating system. And the humans had turned their vessel into a 3-dimensional textbook of applied impossible physics. How? Vex'tal whispered. How did you advance so far beyond the rest of us? Kane was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of sadness that made Vex'tal's heart ache in sympathy. Commander, when you spend 300 years being told you're inferior, you have 2 choices. You can accept it and fade away, or you can prove them wrong so thoroughly that the question never comes up again. The human ship began to move away, slowly, gracefully, like a predator that had made its point and was ready to return to its lair. We chose the second option. We spent 3 centuries studying every species in the galaxy, learning from their strengths, understanding their weaknesses, and most importantly, figuring out why they thought they were better than us. Kane's voice grew distant as the ship moved farther away. What we discovered was that they weren't better. They were just older. They'd had more time to develop their technologies, their societies, their sense of superiority. But age isn't the same as wisdom, Commander, and being first doesn't make you best. The tactical display showed the human ship reaching the edge of sensor range. In a few minutes, it would be gone, leaving behind only the memory of the most one-sided battle in galactic history. The Coalition has 48 hours to remove all military presence from human space. Kane's voice crackled through the static as distance degraded the signal. After that, we'll assume you've decided to continue your education in advanced warfare. Wait! Vex'tal called out. What about our ships? Our crews? Kane's laughter drifted back like an echo from a distant star. Oh, don't worry about them, Commander. The effects are temporary. Well, mostly temporary. The singing should stop in a few days, the transparency will fade, and the interior decorating will return to normal. Consider it a learning experience. The human ship vanished from sensors, leaving behind a fleet of disabled, confused, and thoroughly humiliated vessels. Vex'tal stood on his bridge, staring at the empty space where the most terrifying 4 minutes of his life had just concluded. Sir. Lieutenant Zizak's voice was small, uncertain. What do we do now? Vex'tal looked around at his crew, at the beings who'd followed him into battle expecting glory and finding instead a lesson in humility that would reshape their understanding of the universe. Now, Lieutenant, he said quietly, we go home, and we make sure this never happens again. As emergency repairs began across the fleet, and crews started figuring out how to explain to their superiors that they'd been defeated by a single ship without landing a single hit in return, Vex'tal found himself thinking about Kane's words. Been 300 years of unwelcome education. 3 centuries of being underestimated, attacked, and dismissed. And in response, humanity had become something that transcended conventional understanding of what was possible. The truly terrifying part wasn't what they'd done today. It was the calm, measured way they'd done it. This wasn't rage or revenge. This was a demonstration. A polite, professional explanation of why humanity was done being the galaxy's victim. As the vengeance of stars limped toward home, its engines stuttering back to life, Vex'tal made a mental note to recommend that the Coalition's first official act should be a formal apology, and maybe some flowers. After all, if humanity had learned to rewrite the laws of physics, who knew what they might do with proper diplomatic protocols? The galaxy, he realized, was about to become a much more polite place.